Hi everybody, it's Professor Diffley. This is Philosophy 255, Ethics in Social Work, Human Services. So this is the lecture slides and my lecture 4, chapter 5, Self-Determination. So we're beginning the second part of the text, the course here, where we're going to start looking at the code more and more and looking at key parts of the code and key concepts there. And we're going to begin to apply those to ethical scenarios that we've talked about before. So a couple of notes going into this. Some of the things you should start doing is really making note of any code section that appears in the slides. Highlight them, circle them in your code books, keep a running list, something. But these are, if they're in the slides, they're going to show up somewhere down the line, these concepts, but especially the code sections, as you see on assignments writing, that you're going to have to apply these, right? State the code, give the code section, and then apply it to the scenario there. So make sure you take a look at that. Also, more than ever, take a look at the notes to all the slides. Not all the slides have notes, but when they do, they're important. It'll explain things further, give some more examples, things I would have talked about in person. But additionally, too, one of the important things is now really pay attention to the exemplars in each chapter. These would have been talking points in class if we were in person that we would discuss. So take a look at those, read those, look at the explanations and discussions afterwards in the textbooks, and really keep note on those. They help understand the concepts, and they're also a good example of the types of ethical scenarios you're going to start that you're going to see more and more on quizzes and the final exam. In the notes, and this is connected to that, I do point out places where you should be looking at exemplars. I give the exemplar number and the page number where you find it in the textbook with those. So make sure you take a look at this. All right, so now where we're at, Chapter 5. So Chapter 5 and Chapter 6 will be combined into a quiz because they go together. Chapter 5 starts the concept of self-determination. And we're going to hit on and continue this in Chapter 6, which looks at value neutrality and imposing values. One of the dilemmas we're going to see here in Chapter 5 is that clients have right to self-determination, but you're also there because you're going to have professional expertise. And you're going to be, remember, your clients are coming to you for help. And so there is a real dilemma and, a conflict there between what you think is right as a professional and what the client's going to want to do. Chapter 6, we're really going to look in how you balance telling a client what is right, but without forcing them or telling them what to do. Remember, clients have to make decisions themselves. That's part of self-determination. So we'll take a look through these slides now, but as always, read the text. If you have any questions, just let me know. Email me directly, and I'm happy to answer them. Okay, so one of the first questions here is, who is the client? This is in your text book as well, but it's not always going to be clear who the client is. You're going to have several different categories. Applicants, the person who system request help with a find or felt problem. The client can sometimes be the applicant, but not always. But a client is someone who enters in a formal contractual goal-focused relationship. The target, who we're trying to help here. Beneficiary, who's going to be helped by the treatment between the client and the practitioner. This is very important to note who is the client, and you see this especially in exemplars 5.1 and 5.2. Really take a look at those, and let me just show you this. As you see in the notes, I also have here those exemplars, as I was talking about before, where to look for them. And some additional information there, so make sure you're paying attention to that. It's not always going to be clear who the client is, and you're going to see this is going to be a recurring theme in ethical scenarios. It's always going to be identify the client. That's going to be one thing you're going to have to do every time. Take a look at those exemplars. They're really going to give you a guide on how to do this, but it's the person who you're counseling. Most always, there are differences when there's someone who's been court ordered. Who is the client? Do they truly have self-determination? Those are topics we will look at further. So self-determination, what does it mean? It's the right of a client to make their own decisions and choices. Again, it's not the professional's responsibility to put their own opinion on the client. Actually, your goal is to not do that, not put your opinions, your views, your values, what we look at in Chapter 6, onto the client. They have to make their own decisions and choices talked about this before. That's important because they need to own it, right? And we all know that you need to make a decision. It's yours. You have to be committed to it. That's going to be help. However, you do have a responsibility as a professional to help the client make informed decisions and help them understand the impacts of those decisions. And you in short, you got to give them. We're going to see this later in this chapter, and there's a whole other chapter in informed consent. You have to give them all the information. Remember, this is about connect this to. Kant's idea of the practical imperative, where we have to be honest with each other, right? That's the only way you could have truly self-determination. Same concept is here, and we're going to see this. This is in the code there. From the Social Work Dictionary, this says self-determination, ethical principle in social work that recognize the rights and needs of clients to be free to make their own choices and decisions. Again, as I was just saying, as we studied in the first part of this course, to truly be free to make choices and decisions, to have self-will, free will, self-determination, you got to have information, right? You need to have a clear picture. That's why it's not good to lie to someone, because then you're not letting them make their own decisions. Inherent in this, according to the dictionary here, is a requirement for a social worker to help the client know what the resources and choices are, right? Again, the idea of having all the information along with the consequences. This also includes helping the client implement the decision made, right? So here's what you need to do. And now here, here's a helping professional. Here, we're going to help you get to your goal. Not going to do it for you, but we're going to help you make it more easier and more possible for them to achieve that. Self-determination, other approaches. Again, we've seen this in the Kant and deontology here, as I was talking about. This is also a first order principle here in the United States, right? We have self-determination. We decide what we're going to do. We have freedom in that. It's not enumerated, right? But we do have this right. It exists under the 9th and 14th Amendments. Certain significant restrictions can be placed on individual autonomy, as we all know, in various cases. If they're a threat, if there's a public health threat or things like that, some restrictions can be put there. But again, they have to be exceptional ideas. And so that's why even your code puts this near the front. As we're going to see, the code of this is in the code. For social workers throughout, it's one of the code's values, dignity and worth of the person. It's the second thing in the code, section 102, self-determination. So again, when you see these, definitely make sure to make note of them, these code sections here. Social workers must respect and promote the right of clients to self-determination and assist the clients in those efforts and clarify their goals, right? Now, we're going to see this later, mentioning it here. There are times where you can limit a client's self-determination, but that's when they client's actions or potential actions pose a serious, foreseeable, and imminent risk to themselves or others. We've talked about that before. That's a Tarasoff decision. It is actually covered in detail later chapters. But again, and we'll get into that because it's a very fine line you have to walk on what is truly foreseeable in any of this here. So the other thing here with, and let me go here again with, I want to see exemplars and notes here. For this one, you can see I have a lot of notes here. This gives a little bit more on the Tarasoff decision and the idea of exceptionally, when you can override a client's self-determination. It gives some ideas there. But this also points you to the exemplars 5.3 and 5.4. 5.3 combines two concepts here, one and two things, like I said, you're going to have to start looking at: identifying the client and issues of self-determination, and that's on page 98. While self-determination and professional expertise, the conflict and dilemma between them is in exemplar 5.4 on page 99. So you'll see, really between 98 and 99, these two exemplars that really cover this. Take a look. There are good explanations out of textbook. Any questions, let me know on those. Let's get to this, the concept of informed consent. Again, there's an entire chapter on this, so we'll deal with this a bit more. But informed consent is the knowledgeable and voluntary agreement by a client to undergo an intervention that is in accord with the client's values and preferences. And again, this comes from the code there. And again, consent for treatment be given after all information about their condition of illness, right? So to make a decision, informed decision, you need to have all the options laid out there. Given to you, they can't hide some from you. You have to be able to make an informed decision. You do that by having information. And so they really need to be able to have that free self-will, self-determination to make that. There are going to be some cases where this is hard to get informed consent when clients lack capacity to provide informed consent. They're going to seek permission from a third party, who is able to speak for them, either legally in one way, a guardian. And you're also going to have, when you have informed consent, we'll see this later, when you're trying to get it, you have to give the information consistent with their level of understanding. And so this could mean, for some people it has to be in writing and oral. Some it's just oral. Some it's, people may just say they're getting it, but you need to make sure they truly get it. About whether or not someone lacks capacity, this is completely and fully a decision made by a judge. And not you, all right? If you think there is, that's when you bring that maybe someone has dementia or something else, is unable to truly lacks capacity to make decisions, then it would go to a judge. Say someone has dementia and they are out of it 23 hours and 30 minutes a day. In those 30 minutes, there are cases that say in those 30 minutes, while they were lucid and knew what was going on, they were able to make these decisions. So we're going to see it's very difficult, very fine line. But there are going to be cases where you're going to have clients that do not have the capacity to make this. And this is in Section 103C, 103D here. When you have involuntary clients here, this is going to be issue for D is, when they're involuntary, you got to give them what their rights are, is essentially the court ordered, you're in a prison somewhere, it's questions of self-determination are much trickier in those cases. We're not going to look at a lot of that here. That's more specialized, you'll see in other classes. But note that can be an issue, right? Does someone who is in prison truly have self-determination? Someone who's being forced into, say, anger management. Was it their self-determination? So, and that also brings who's the client there, and issues like that. But don't worry too much about that. But really focus on C here, 103C, the idea of want to keep an eye out to see, does your client need help? Are they fully understanding what they're doing? That sort of thing. And again, here's a checklist for defining informed consent. You need to inform clients about the services being offered. So example list, what is the purpose and goals? What models of intervention will be used? What ones do you agree not to use? You have to tell them, which ones are better in the sense of what does the research say, right? And you also have to know what their expectations are, right? Remember, it's not a miracle cure. But you need to give them the full picture. And for each client, that's going to be different on how you give it. Too much information for some clients up front is overload. But this is something you really want to focus on and work on, and something you will. You're going to know your clients best for that. But again, informed consent for us is about getting as much information to the client that they're going to need. One of the other dilemmas here, though, is professional expertise and self-determination. We know what an ethical dilemma is, but here the conflict is you're supposed to support and guarantee the client's self-determination and autonomy, but you also are supposed to give them and help them make decisions that assure the best outcomes for them, and that's based on your professional knowledge and your skill. You're going to know and say, this is what you should do, right? This is what you're thinking, and the client's going to want to do something else. Here is where the dilemmas start coming in, and you can really see this again, in 5.4, exemplar 5.4 is really where you're going to see this more and more, is this ethical dilemma. On that, how to balance self-determination with your knowledge and skill. This is something we'll go into heavily in Chapter 6. So this is just setting it up there. And what we're going to do, this is going to be a key factor. So again, these things are important. They're gonna butt heads, and that's going to be what the dilemma is. Again, you got to be comfortable with. It's not always going to be clear answers. All right, we will pick up and finish this up in the second video. I'll see you then.